Welcome back, VITA volunteers. This session will continue from session 1A. In session 1A, we learned about the general overview of the VITA program and the volunteer standards of conduct and sort of an overview of the tests that you're going to have to take and how to get into Link and Learn where you actually take those tests. Now, I had mentioned in that video that when you're ready to take the advanced certification test, 3 of the scenarios will require you to prepare tax returns to be able to answer the questions. So what we're going to do in this video is show you how to access the TaxSlayer tax preparation program, and specifically what we call Practice Lab. That's where you're going to do these returns. So we're going to go over how to do that and get started. Now, you probably don't have to access Practice Lab until you're ready to start doing the certification test, which would be at the end of these videos. However, I would like you to work in Practice Lab. It'll take a little practice, and I would like you to work through these. We're going to go working through some of the testing questions and the scenarios as we go along throughout this program. So we want to get you started in Practice Lab now. So as I said, this is what we're going to do is work on TaxSlayer Practice Lab. Now, here's the first thing you need to know about TaxSlayer. And as I've mentioned earlier, you're going to have 3 sets of logins and passwords. You're going to have one set of logins and password for the Link and Learn site. Then you're going to have another login and password for the Practice Lab in here. And then third, when you get in on the site, you're going to have the official login for the TaxSlayer program. So you can access TaxSlayer in several ways. One, you could go directly to the website using this URL. This is kind of the hardest way to do it. You could also access the Practice Lab in the Link Learn certification website. And I showed you that in the last video. Right when you first get on there, before you log in, there's a little link to Practice Lab. And that's probably the quickest way that you can get there. This shows you a picture of what I just described, how you could get to that little link from the Link Learn certification page before you log in. Okay. Once you do this and you get this set up, and I'm going to show you how to set up your account in just a second here, but you're going to probably want to save this link above, onto your desktop or into your favorites somewhere, because you will be using this a lot through this course for doing it. As I said, the Link and Learn password is not the same, and it won't work in Practice Lab. So you want to write these down so that you keep track of them and you have easy access to it. It can be very frustrating when you're ready to go start doing something and you can't get into the account. Now, this is important. You're probably going to want to write this down on your list of passwords, because there's 2 gateways, if you will, to be able to get into Practice Lab. And the first time when you click on that link, it's going to ask you for a password. This is not the one you're going to save. This is a generic password to get you into where you can log in to Practice Lab. And that password is right here. It's Train Pro Web in all caps. So you really want to write that down somewhere where you can know, because you'll see in a minute when I show you here how that's the first gateway that you're going to get into. And then next, we're going to go in, and in a minute, we're going to create the account to set it up. And I'll show you exactly what fields. Here, I'm going to give you a brief review of it, and then we're going to actually go in and do it here. So when you first get to the screen, you're going to see this right here, the first one. This is where you're going to put in that first gateway password, Train Pro Web. And then it's going to take you to the second screen. And here you're going to want to create an account. As I said, we're going to walk through and do this in just a minute, but this is just giving you a preview of it. Okay, third, we're going to put in all of this required information. And I'll go through that more slowly and show you what it's going to look like. Okay, and then once you get the account set up, to actually access Practice lab, you're going to click here to go to the practice area. Okay. And then I'll stop right here and we'll go get your account set up and then come back to here where we actually start working in practice lab. So I'm going to stop sharing that, a browser. I'm going to show you a third way of accessing this. So now you're seeing a browser right here. So if you forget the link or you don't want to go to link and learn, sometimes here's a third way you can find where the practice, you can Google, VITA practice lab. And here it'll take you here to this TaxSlayer Pro practice lab. Now, right here is where I said when you would, one of three ways. You either use the link, you go to link learn and click on the little practice lab link, or you do it through Google, what I just did. Anyway, gets you to right here. And then right here where it says enter the password, this is where I'm going to put in train pro web in all caps right there. Okay, now when I do this right here, it sees that I have a password manager and it sees I've got an account, but I'm not going to log into that account now. I'm going to go create a fake one right now. So I'm going to click on create account. I need to put in an email address. Okay. Now, if I put in a username, I'll just try Jim S. Okay, now it tells me, do you see what's going on here? Over here in this right thing, it says it's got to be at least 8 characters long. So I got 4 in there. I'll go ahead and put in the next 4 letters of my last name, right? It's going to ask you for a password. And I think you're going to find out these passwords are very, and by the way, ignore this suggestion here that it's getting. Um, you will see that the passwords um, will require some stuff. So I'm going to just start it off here. I'm going to say VITA, VITA. Actually, I'm going to use the @ symbol because I think it's going to require that. VITA 2025. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just see if that works or not. VITA @ 2025, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, okay, see the error that I'm getting there? It says the password must be at least 15 and no more than 25 characters in length. So let me just think of what I just did here. I put in 12 characters. So I'm just going to continue 5, 6, 7. So I got a good password. Now where it says program type, this is just simple. I ignore all of these things. It's just VITA, okay? You do not need this site identification number for Practice Lab. So just ignore it, okay? You will need to know security questions. So we'll say here in what city were you born. I'll put in Phoenix, okay? And then now I'm going to say create an account. Okay. I'm going to add it to my active thing. So let's see. What was my username? I put in Jim S and then IMPS. See why you need to write down your passwords? So good. Okay. I got signed in. I have an account. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and say add this password so that I've got a record of what I've done here. Okay. And so then this takes you here to the practice lab, the homepage. I want to just stay here for just a second for you to look at some things. I know in the slideshow presentation, we said we're going to go to the practice area, and we'll do that in a moment. But I first want you to see what's on this screen. Okay, here's where you could get to a user guide. Here, a lot of this stuff really won't concern you, like configuring TaxSlayer Pro. That's for the site coordinator or your IT guy for your organization. Same thing with installing TaxSlayer Pro. But look down here in section 4. This will give you guides to preparing a return, entering basic information, entering adjusted gross income. These are little guides that you can go through. And even better, a lot of our new volunteers are thinking, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing here. And so we've got practice returns over here that you can do. And by the way, even though I said that, you're going to feel that way. Don't worry about it. When you first get to a site, your site coordinator is going to give you some easy returns and maybe have you sit with somebody for a couple things. And so you're watching and seeing how it goes before they turn you out on your own. And remember, there's always somebody reviewing your work. Okay. But if you want to get more practice before the tax season starts, do you see all these practice returns? You can go click on these and it gives you kind of a fact pattern as if you've interviewed somebody, and then it allows you to prepare the return, and then it gives you what the return should look like when you get done so you can check your work. Okay, there's even ones for the international and military one. There's some webinars here that you can watch. So I wanted you to just be aware of that. Okay, so right here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to go back to our presentation here just to kind of walk through a few things before we actually get into TaxSlayer. So once I say get to the practice area, it'll say here, welcome to Practice Lab. And when you want to start a new return, you're going to select right here to start a return. Okay. So this is kind of the first section of how to get you started. Now, so okay, so here's where we were. I already kind of talked to you about exploring these kinds of things and clicking here to go to the practice area. These were these practice returns I just showed you about here. So here's where we're going to say select and start a new return. The very first thing is you need to enter a social security number. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to pull up a real return out of the test booklet that you have to prepare. We're going to actually get started on doing some of those. And the very first thing is you're going to enter a social security number. Now, in that test booklet, it's going to give you this fact pattern about who you're preparing it for and all that. And then it'll give you pictures of their social security cards. And they all have zeros right here. They'll all start off with 3 numbers, like say 418. The 00 is already programmed. And then you just put in any 4 numbers you want. I generally use 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But then you got to match it up here. Whatever you used up here, you've got to use up here. Okay. Then there's all of these, what they call profiles. Just ignore it. It defaults to the basic no profile. That's what we're always going to use. Even when you get into the live program, that's what you'll use. And we'll click down here to say start a return. Okay, first screen you're going to see is what's your filing status. Now, most of the test returns, well, I said, yeah, they pretty much give you what the filing status was. In the real life, we have to go by the intake and interview sheet, what they said, and then we've got to ask them questions. Because sometimes we can determine that, hey, they're not single, they're head of household. Or, if they're not single because they're actually married. Yeah, they haven't lived apart, they've lived apart for a long time, but those are all things we're going to talk about in the next session, the filing status. But for purposes of what we're doing, the test book usually will tell you what the filing status is. So here's the screen for personal information. Now, here's the thing to notice. See these little red asterisks right here? These are required fields. The program will not let you go forward without putting in those numbers. Now, sometimes the field isn't required, it's optional, and sometimes we really want to put it in, like say occupation down here. We really want to put in the occupation. IRS prefers that. They use that information when they're targeting returns to audit or whatever. Um, Also about this screen is like the personal information screen. You want to get all of the fields in here and then click on the continue button. You don't want to use the arrow buttons on your browser in TaxSlayer. They don't like that at all. And you'll quite often you'll lose work if you do that. Okay, so use the continue and back buttons within TaxSlayer. Here's going down lower down the screen. There's a lot of questions. I'm going to go over some of these questions. They can be important. Then here's where you're going to put in an address. Notice that that's got an asterisk on it. It's required. Um, and you'll find in TaxSlayer, if you put in the zip code, it'll pre-populate the city, town, and state for you. Okay. As I said, when you get all of these put in, a phone number is required. This is very important when you get at a site because if a return rejects and the site coordinator has to get in touch with the taxpayer to fix something, that's usually where we go look for the phone number. Okay, so it's very important we get that accurate. So as I said, you're going to click on here, continue to do that. When you are all done with TaxSlayer, there's a login, log out screen. Or let's say that you just saved and exited the return so you can go use the restroom and you're going to come back and work on it again. You can come down here where it says client search down here and you can go down here to reopen that return. Okay. This is the basic screen that we just did. And you really, you notice, see these two things say edit? You've already gone through these first two screens. We selected the filing status and we put in their name and address and spousal information and stuff. The next one it'll take you to is the dependent screen, right? A few things before we move on here. And in just a second, we're going to go in the program and start practicing some of this. But this is really important that you check your data entry. The name, the address, the social security number, or on the screen it says ITIN. An ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number. If somebody doesn't qualify for a social security number, maybe they're here on a student visa studying or they've applied, they're a non-resident alien for whatever, they're assigned ITIN numbers. Okay. These numbers, the computers at IRS check them, and they cross-check with the Social Security database to check the name as well. And there's one of the big rejects that we'll get. It's one of the reasons we really require, well, we require the Social Security card mainly to protect against identity theft. But if we have the actual card, we have a better way of making sure that the name matches that database and we don't get rejects for that. Okay, so I'm going to stop here before we get into any income, but this is where we're going to start it, and we'll pick back up from here after we get started on a return. Okay, so let's go back into TaxSlayer. Okay, and remember what I said here is go to practice area right here. Now, what we're going to do, and I really want to encourage you to do this, okay? We're going to have you start working on those test returns that you have to do. So throughout all these series of instructional videos, as you learn a little bit, you can go in and practice on those returns and be putting some in. So I'm going to open up the test booklet. In fact, I'll stop sharing this screen right now. Okay, so we're seeing the test booklet. And as I scroll down through this test booklet, I've already shown you the table of contents, and we're going to start with the advanced scenarios. Now, remember what I told you, these first 6 scenarios, advanced scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the ones that just give you a fact pattern and ask you a few questions about them. But starting with scenario 7, Yvette Willis, you have to start doing a return. So I'm going to go scroll down here to page 81, and let's kind of go over this together and look at what they're asking for here. Okay, I'll make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so here's the fact pattern that they're saying, and it tells you in the directions using the tax software, complete the tax return, including Form 1040, all appropriate forms, schedules, or worksheets, and answer the questions following the scenario. I'm going to stop right here. Some folks, especially if they've had a little bit of experience with tax preparation, they'll go down and look at those questions and they'll say, well, hey, I don't need to prepare the whole return to be able to answer this question. I highly discourage that for a couple of reasons. Number one, you need the practice preparing the returns. Number two, some of the questions they ask you, you think you might know the answer to, but after you prepare the return, different things in the return depend on other different things in the return to to calculate properly. You know, how much is their tax liability depends on how much capital gains that they have, right? You can't just rely on that. So I'm really encouraging you to do the return before you answer the questions for that. So let's read what here, and it even tells you, as I told you a moment ago, right? When entering social security numbers or employer identification numbers, replace the X's as directed with any 4 digits of your choice. So here's an example down here is you can see the social security cards. It goes 41600, and that's pre-populated in Practice Lab. And then you just put in any 4 numbers that you want here for the XXX. As I told you, I use 1, 2, 3, 4 until I have to do multiple returns. So let's review some of these interview notes so that we've got a concept of what kind of return we're doing. So Martin is a 5th grade teacher at a public school. Martin and Yvette are married, remember, and choose to file married filing jointly. So this is one where we don't have to go figure out their filing status. We're being told what that was, okay? It says that Martin worked 1,600 hours in 2025, and he had some school expenses. We're going to see why that matters in a couple of sessions here. I think in our next session, we'll see. Then Yvette retired in 2022 and began receiving her pension on November 1st of that year. She explains that this is a joint and survivor annuity. Don't worry about this. We're going to go cover what this is. I just want you to get an idea of what this return's about. So she's got retirement income. And then it looks like Martin settled with his credit card company, and it looks like they forgave some debt. And we're going to see what we have to do with that later. It says Yvette won $500 from a prize drawing. Okay. Then here it starts to get a little complicated because their daughter Abby is in her 2nd year of college pursuing a bachelor's degree. And it gives us a lot of information about what her expenses were and what the school form issued her, the 1098T. We're going to have a whole session on refundable, non-refundable credits and refundable credits where we'll go over this stuff. Okay, and then here's their social security card. So they're married and they've got a daughter. That's really what you need to know now for it. So I will come back. If you want, you could open up your test booklet, or if you've got a PDF file and you want to follow along, because I'm not going to come back and show you where I'm getting the information as I start preparing this return. But if you want to see where it's coming from, open this up and go down to page 81 in your test booklet, and you can see where we get it. So let me stop sharing this and go back to sharing Practice Lab. There we go. Okay, so we're back here at Practice Lab. We're going to say start a new return. Now, I've already done these returns, so I'm going to create a second one. I'm going to put 416, and then remember the 0. This is Martin Willis's. He's the husband. This is his social security number. And instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 5 because I've already used 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 416 and 1, 2, 3, 5. And remember, don't even choose any of these profiles. Just leave it where it's set and say start a return. Okay. This takes us to the basic information screen, or the filing status screen, I'm sorry. And the test question already told us that this was married filing jointly. So I'm going to hit continue here. Okay, and right off of his social security card, we'll see it's Martin. By the way, while I'm here, and you'll find, some new volunteers get a little bit confused about this. IRS really likes capital letters. Okay. I personally don't. It makes it easier for me to see it. And usually when the return prints, I'm pretty sure it prints out in capital letters. You can choose to put on all your caps locks and do this all in capital letters. It makes no difference. So just tell you now, there was no middle initial in his last name, and it's Willis. There's no middle initial in his name. Willis was his last name. We already put in his social security number. Now we got to find date of birth. Okay. And where do you think we're going to find that? You're right, from the intake and interview sheet. And so, although you can't see it, if I was to scroll down from page 81 in the test booklet down to 82, I would see the intake and interview sheet. Okay. And on that intake and interview sheet, it's telling me that he was born May 1st, 1964. Okay. So here you can 05, 01, 1964. I have a password manager. That's what this little red thing here. I think that there's a date lookup there. I forget. I usually just type in the date. And his occupation, again, that's from that intake and interview sheet, says he's a teacher. Okay. Now, I want to slow down just a minute. Here's all these questions. Probably 90% of the time, none of these are going to apply to you. Okay. But you should slow down right here because sometimes it will. Okay. Sometimes you're going to be doing the kids, have a job and we want to do a tax return for them and they're being claimed on their parents' return. So we have to click this box right here. Or often, we're doing a return for somebody and they live with their parents. And if they're over 18 and a full-time student at an eligible education institution, we're going to find why that matters when we start talking about dependency status. Or the taxpayer could be blind. If you're wondering, well, how do I know? Usually they will know and they'll tell you. But if you look in your 4012, there's an IRS definition. I can't remember exactly what it is, but the doctor pretty much has to certify you, and it depends on the percentage of what you can see or not. And any taxpayer that has a doctor certification of that, they're going to know and they'll tell you. Okay. Sometimes we'll be doing a return to where, one of the taxpayers died, and we're going to say, click this thing. This one's kind of funny. I will tell. Taxpayer wishes to contribute $3 to the presidential election campaign fund. I've been doing taxes for 35 years. I almost can't, maybe once or twice I've seen somebody click that. There's no reason not to. It's kind of like here in Arizona, we have that campaign fund where as long as they agree not to spend more money, it's called the Clean Elections Campaign. Well, this is kind of like at the federal level. Now, what I have noticed is on the intake and interview sheets in this text booklet, this year, I noticed a few of them had this checked. And I'm going to go look at his. There it is. Right. And I just found it. It's on page 1 of it. And it says, would you or your spouse, if married filing jointly, like $3 to go to the presidential election campaign fund? And on this one, yeah, it says yes for him, but not for the spouse. So for him, I should go click this button right here. It does not change their taxes, the taxes that they pay or any refund. That has no effect whatsoever, but we should be diligent about doing that. Some of these others are not, they're rare. Did they serve in a combat zone? Were they affected by a national disaster? This is one that IRS is getting very particular about. Did they receive, sell, or dispose of the digital asset? And by the way, and that's a question on the intake form, and if they did, it is out of scope. We cannot do their return for them. So you're probably never going to check this, because if you did check it, we're not supposed to be doing the return. It can get really complicated with digital assets. Okay, we need to refer them to professional taxpayers. You may get some taxpayers. We get a lot of, especially here. I'm in the Southwest in Arizona. We do serve a lot of people who only speak Spanish, and this would be a good thing to put in there that they prefer to receive their communications other than English. I think if I click this, it gives me a choice right there to select that. Okay. Then next, we're going to put in the spouse's first name. And in this case, her name was Yvette. I got that off of the intake and interview sheet. It populated the last name with Willis, but be careful, especially these days, the spouse doesn't always use the same last name for that. Social Security number, I'm going to get off of the test booklet, and hers started with 417. Now here I have to type in the 00. Okay, it's not like on the other one. And here, instead of 1234, I'm going to use 1235. And then her date of birth was, let's see here, her date of birth was October 8th, 1955. Okay. And her occupation was retired. Okay. None of these questions apply to her. Okay. Now I have to put in the address, and on the intake form, it says 1234 Charity Avenue. No apartment number, but their zip code. Now, here's another interesting thing about these practice lab returns. On the intake form, when it says city, state, and zip code, it's going to say either your zip or YS for like your state, right? In other words, just make one up, right? I'll put in here one that I know is an Arizona zip code. And as I told you, do you see how it populated the city and state based on the zip code? It does a lookup for that. You need to put in a daytime phone number. Just make one up for these things. It doesn't matter. Okay. You'll see this thing about invite to a customer portal. Just ignore it. You may learn when this came about during COVID, when we had to be doing things remote. We're not doing very much of it remote anymore. And really, only your site coordinator is going to want to arrange this. So just ignore this part. So I'm done. I've made sure that I filled out everything with an asterisk that's in there, and I'm going to say continue. And this gets me here to the dependent screen. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to go in here and say, I got to move this thing down here. I'm going to say save and exit. We're going to come back to this return and start putting in other stuff as we go through and work through this will be kind of your homework, if you will. I'll come back and I'll show it to you, and then I want you to kind of do homework and be filling out these returns so that when we get to the end of all of these sessions, you've filled out these returns. You should be able to have them all done by doing it. So I'll save and exit that, save and exit the return. Now, before I leave here, if I wanted to get back into it, I would go to client search right here. I could go in here and I could go select the return to open it. There's a couple of things while I'm here. I just want to go over this because later on I'm going to show you the importance of what it is. See this little grayed out thing right here? Add notes. Every single, now, depending on where you work in your organization, sometimes you might have different rules. In my organization and most of our partners in the Phoenix area, we require at least one note on the return, okay? And every note, excuse me, every note should start with tax year 2025, or this is the year, okay? Sometimes you'll put in notes about their missing information or um, some decision that you've made, but everyone should have at least one note that I put down here in the description, PP for preparer, GMS, and your site coordinator may have you do something else. And then I usually have them do, for some reason, this won't let me do it. Oh, QR, whoever reviews this, right? So whoever the reviewer was will put this in. You can have multiple notes. The reason we start it with tax year 2025 is because if somebody comes back to your site next year, you go to click on a new return and you put in their social security number, it's going to pull up all their information and all the notes that were made in the previous year so that you can see them. And if you just put up in here, like say missing W-2, right? Well, the quality reviewer may look at this and say, oh, we can't finish this. We're missing a W-2, right? Well, no, that was the prior year you were missing one. So that's why this is important. We'll go over this again, but while I was here, I went ahead and saved it. And now this lights up, so I know I've got a note right there. Okay, let me stop sharing. Let's go back into our presentation and see what else I think we're gonna start talking about income now. Okay, good. Okay, so we're back here. Give me 1 minute here. Good. Okay, so once now we've put in all of the basic information, now we want to start putting in some income. And the income comes from several places. The first thing you want to do is look at that intake and interview review sheet because they marked what kind of income. Maybe they don't have a document for it. Maybe they did a little side job and they earned some cash income or whatever. Generally, though, most income has some kind of documents. The W-2 here is from work. The 1099-R is from a retirement program or distribution. 1099 INT is from interest income. 1099 DIV is from dividend income. Here's a real common one, Social Security statement. We have to put in any and all information from the documents and whatever they've noted on their intake and interview sheet. We have kind of a little saying we like to say here. If you see it, key it. In other words, you're going to look at a form. We're going to go look at it in just a minute, right? And if there's a box that's got a number in it, and you're not sure what that box is for, in TaxSlayer, it pretty much models the form. Just key it in the way you see it, okay? Even if you're not sure, okay? Then you'll have state sections. We'll just kind of briefly introduce this. Once you've kind of put in the form, once you put in all of the income and dividend information and things like that, you'll get down. If you put in, when you put in the address and it recognizes the state, it assumes you're going to do that state return. Now, that's not always the case, right? Here I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have snowbirds that come out here. And if they're working here in Arizona, we have to do an Arizona return, or they, might be from a different state. But nevertheless, this is, if it doesn't start the state return for you based on the address, or if the state is different than the address. By the way, be careful, because many VITA partners, they restrict what states they will do. Some can get very complicated, okay? And so you need to talk with your site coordinator if you're going to do a state other than the one you're in, okay? But here's where you could add state returns right here. When you get down to it, it gives you two ways of doing it. You can do it from a drop-down list right here, or you can go click on the state over on this side of it. Here in Arizona, and it's most states, they're going to ask you about, well, are you a resident of Arizona? Are you a part-year resident, non-resident? It defaults to resident, okay? And so then you'll hit continue. And then in this case, here's the Arizona state return, where in a different session, we go over these kinds of things that we do on Arizona returns, but that will be apart from this session. Okay. Now, once you've gotten all the information into the return, here's a way you can look at it. Okay, is you want to go to summary and print, and there's several ways that you can do this. Okay, so right here, when you over in TaxSlayer, and I'm gonna walk through this in just a minute for you. Okay, in TaxSlayer, when you go to summary and print, it'll pull up a facsimile of the return. We all have our own personal preferences. I never use this. I found many times it's not really accurate. What I want to do is I want to actually go print a PDF of the return. But before I leave here, let's look over here. See, here's a return that's been done. They put in some wages down here, and it's actually calculated what their adjusted gross income is. This is their federal refund. This is their state refund. Now, usually you're sitting here with a taxpayer doing the return. I collapse this menu because I see right away they start focusing on this number. And every time I put something in there, that number changes. And I don't want them to see, hey, they're getting $1,000 back, but then I haven't put in their Social Security, which might be taxable, and then their refund goes down to 500 and they freak out on me. I collapse this menu. Okay, so it's not seen. There are two ways of printing the tax returns. As I said, back up here, I don't use this to look at it and see it, okay? Here, I'll show you the two ways. When you have the client's tax return open in the e-file section, click on Print Return, and then you wait until the PDF file is created and press Print Results. Now, I'll show you how that works in a second, okay? So here's now where you've gotten down there towards the end of the return. This drop-down list, depending on the site you work in, they put various types of print files. One might say taxpayer copy print. One might say quality review print. Some might say paper file return. Depending, your site coordinator will tell you which one's best. But you can print the return right here, okay? There's another way that you could do it is on the main screen in the client search, there's a little printer icon, and you can click on that and it'll bring down a drop down of the correct print set. So here's pictures of that. So this would be where you're searching for a client, right? You've clicked on that like you want to reopen the client again. So here it says Tom Andrews right here. See how that little printer thing is lit up? Remember a minute ago we did a note over here. Here's the printer thing. And if you click on that, if you click on that, it will open up the list of which print formats that you want to use, right? Even as a preparer, you'll hear me coach you through these. I like you to be thinking about as you're inputting things, what the return's going to look like. And I always say, print the return, take a look at it. Does it even look right? Or did you see maybe you missed some big thing, right? That didn't go through. As you're inputting, this takes practice and maybe even a few years of experience to do. But, look at the return before you hand it off to the quality reviewer, just to make sure there's no glaring errors on it. There's also an e-file section. And again, I'll show you all of those things in just a second. And you're going to step through several things to where, in this case, you'll pick on whether the taxpayer wants to e-file a return, which that's 99% of our returns. But sometimes now, do they want direct deposit? And I think I mentioned this, maybe I didn't, and now's a good time to mention it. The Treasury Department a few months ago, there was an executive order. Trump directed the Treasury Department to say, you're not going to issue paper checks anymore, and you're not going to receive paper checks. Now, it's going to take them some while to implement that, but they have already said we are not going to issue paper checks. Now, how they're going to implement that. They first said they were going to issue debit cards. Now they backed off of that. And here's what here as of today, and this could change by the time you hear this video. As of today, they said if you e-file a return or even file a paper return, and you don't give them direct deposit bank information, first step is they're going to send you a letter explaining why they're requesting it, that checks are subject to fraud, they get lost. It's really in your best interest, to have us deposit the money directly into your account. Please send us your bank account information, or if you don't have it, check here and sign this and send it back to us. So right away, we filed a return. They got it in a day, but now they're on this waiting period. And most of our taxpayers, boy, they're needing this money. But so they're going to have to wait to the letter, and then they're going to send back the letter. And I'm telling you, IRS is not opening their letters very fast these days. We all know this, right? But then IRS will open the letter, and they've said that they then will send a check as a last resort. So we usually, I just kind of wanted to let you know while I was at this thing here too, that you can, there's a section there where you could check paper check, right, from the drop down here. When I open up that return again, I'm going to kind of show you this e-file section that shows all of these steps you go through before you get to where you're ready to complete the return. Again, this is just showing you that drop down thing. We don't require emails. Maybe you might work in a place where they encourage that. It's not really required. This is where you put in the bank account information. I will tell you, this you want to double, triple check that it's correct. And I usually turn the screen to the taxpayer, have them watch me input it, right? Oftentimes they're doing it off of their phone, and it's really easy to kind of transpose numbers off of that. And even in the software, it's going to ask you to put it in twice. Put the routing number in twice, put the bank account number in twice. Okay, then the next thing, see right here, we're at fee summary. Of course, there's no fee. So you're just going to click on continue. Then where it says state ID license, there's a few states that do require it. I think California, New York, Minnesota do. Arizona doesn't require it. If you're in Arizona, I just skip this screen. I don't do it. Then there's a taxpayer consent, and this is the form that's on the back of the intake and interview sheet that they signed. They should have signed. This is the top part of it. And taxpayers will sometimes get confused because you're reading all this stuff and, geez, what does this mean? All that this means, this consent, is so they can go to another VITA site next year, and when you put in their social security number, it'll pull up their basic information. It won't allow the preparer to see their previous return, but it'll pull up name and address and dependents and employer information, right? So you don't have to re-input all of that stuff if it is the same, okay? And it says down here, they can accept or decline it. They don't have to do it, but we have to select one of the other right here. Now it comes to common questions, and this will vary by site. At the end of last tax season, there was an executive order that said we can't ask this kind of information, so we stopped asking it. Sometimes your partner, your sponsor, the VITA sponsor, may put in custom questions in there that help them with their fundraising or other demographic information. The next one, I've never seen the custom credit screen. This would be, as I said, it's set up by the office, and we're not charging them a fee, so we're not giving them any credit. Then you finally get to the submission page. This is the last one here. Okay, this tells you what their refund is and how you've selected for them to get their refund. There's this little arrow. This scrolls down on the screen a little bit. Says how much their state refund is right here. It gives you another chance to print the documents if you haven't. Now, this is important. right here. Um, we have another section where I'm going to go over tags with you and the difference between tags and notes, right? Here's some sample tags, right? Maybe the return's incomplete, or you are filing a paper copy. Maybe you have to for doing it. Um, or we're waiting for a signature for the spouse to come in and sign the return. When you click these things, this helps the site coordinator be sure that they don't inadvertently transmit a return that's not ready, right? So you should pay attention. And these tags will be different for each provider. There's something that the provider programs into there. This is really important. Once you've prepared the return, you need to mark this box that says it's ready for review. Because if you don't, then it doesn't show up in the quality review screen. So it's really important that you put that in there too. And then when you're all done, you're going to say save and exit. Okay. This is another more customized thing of of tags, return tags. That again, maybe it needs a signature or you're filing the state only. Here's one that says it's an amended return, right? Um, Usually we don't complicate it too much about this, right? But depending on what your organization does, you're going to use these tags. Okay. Um, So I think I'm going to go through the rest of these slides about finishing the return, then we'll go back and do a return and I'll show you in live form all of this stuff that we're talking about. Okay. As I said, we're going to talk about what's the difference between tag and status. Now, tag, these are those internal notes for us to use. It doesn't print with the return. Maybe it needs more information or the spouse's signature is required. I just went over those things too. And these are all set up by the site coordinator. Okay. The status, though, is something different. These are pre-established um, uh, modes, if you will, or I'm not thinking of the right word to say, but descriptors to note the status of the return. Like, is it still in progress? And so here's an example. If you don't click that little button that says ready for review, it shows up in the screen as just being in progress. Once you click that it's ready for review, the status changes to this. When the reviewer gets done and he marks it complete, it marks the status as complete. That lets the site coordinator know that they can transmit it. Okay. So see, here's the status things that'll tell you all these returns are in progress. I've already showed you the notes right here. Remember, this was where you could print it out. Here's how you could open the return if you want to. This is all from that client detail sheet in TaxSlayer. Okay. I've already talked about the importance to attach notes to the return. If the return gets rejected, we have to fix the issue. And sometimes we need to know who did the return if we want to call them up or whatever. When the return's rejected, we've got to fix the issue within 24 to 48 hours. You don't have to. This is done by the site coordinator. But the purpose of the notes is to give the site coordinator some information too about doing it. So this is a second way that you can get to the notes screen right here. Is from within this return, you can click on this drop-down menu, and then you select notes, and it gets you to the same place that I showed you right here. Remember, I told you that you start the note with tax year 2025, then you can put in the descriptor of what it says, right? And then you can click on save. So this says, this little saying by Tiana Barrow, is the quickest way to succeed is to start now and figure it out as you go. You can't learn to drive in a parked car. And I guess what this is saying is that as I'm encouraging you, we should start doing tax returns as we go through this, right? So let's go back into practice lab and start putting in some information too. Now, we're going to go through this, but rather than come back to here, what I want you to do before the next section is to look through. This is your test booklet, right? Publication 6744. look through that and look through those advanced course scenarios where you've got an idea of what you're up against. Then open the publication 4012 and read these tabs, A, B, C, D, and E. You just open up the PDF file and you can look at it. Now, here's a little trick that's really valuable. You know, I've told you that when you volunteer here, we're going to give you a hard copy of that publication 4012, right, that you can use for your quick reference. But when you're doing this now, I would encourage you to use the digital copy because you can search the digital copy. All you have to do once the digital copy is open, in fact, let me show you that right here because this is really valuable. So here I'm in the publication 4012, right? And right now, let's just say that I want to find out, I want to find out how do I get to dependence? If I hold down the control key on the keyboard and hit F, it opens up this little thing right here where you can search the whole document. So if I want to put in dependence, right, it says that, hey, we've got 100 matches of dependence right here. I can go click on that. It takes me to the first one. And then right in here, I can just keep clicking these arrows to take me through to where I find out what I want to. So I'd like you guys to practice that, okay? So let's get back into Practice Lab, and we're gonna go in and as kind of a preview of the next section when we start talking about income. Yeah, let me give you a preview of what we're gonna do next time, and then we'll get back into to Practice Lab. Okay, so this here I said was your homework. Go through and practice using that 4012, look at the scenarios, read these tabs. They're not complicated, just skim them, you know, so that you've got an idea of what we're going to talk about next time. Okay, and so here's what we're going to talk about next time. We'll kind of review that homework, what I want you to do. We're going to go look at intake and quality review and how to take that intake test. Then we're going to start getting into the nuts and bolts of how we do it. We're going to talk about filing status, and then I'll split this session up into two like I did this one. And in the second one, we'll talk about dependence and income and some things specific to Arizona Native American income and business income for doing that. So let's end this session by going back into Practice Lab. Okay, so here I'm back in Practice Lab. So let's go back into this return and let me show you some of those things that I just kind of introduced to you. Here, I'm going to go ahead and select it here. So I open the return. Now, all we've really put in is the basic information, right? Okay. Next time we're going to learn how to put in some income information, but there's where we would find in this federal section. See over here on the left, this is your navigation thing. Here's where you would put in income. We're going to talk about next time on W-2s and 1099s. Then I already showed you about how the state section, okay? And right now in Practice Lab, the states are unavailable, so I can't even go in and do anything for that. So I would hit continue here, okay? Here's where I would hit continue. Oh, so remember I said it'll come right up to this thing, and although there's no information in here, it's just the basic information here. I told you don't use this to review the return. Always go up here and click on view and print return right there. And seeing it generated a PDF of this. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Here's an invoice, and of course we don't charge anybody for this. So, and by the way, we don't give this to the taxpayer, but this has some good information for you to go kind of check your work, right? Did you put in the birth date right? You know, did you spell their name right? Is their social security numbers right? Check your data that you've done here. If in between here, once you've put in W-2s and 1099s and all the income stuff, the next couple pages will give you facsimiles of those forms that you can kind of compare to the actual form. Now, we don't have any in here yet, but I'll show you those in the next section. This page is going to be the e-file signature page. We'll talk about that. Here's what the return looks like though. So it's Martin Willis. There's a social security number. Here's all this. Oh, we haven't put in any dependents yet, but we're going to see that they're going to show up. But all I really wanted you to see here is how it generates a PDF of the file. Okay. Now, when you're working at a site and on a computer, be careful because these get generated in here. You probably, when you're done looking at it, you want to close that out. See, it didn't close out the return. I'm still in the return. Let's show you a few other things that we talked about. We talked about the e-file section. See over here on the left where I'm going down? I could always go back to basic information, whatever. Here I'm going to go to e-file. And right here, this shows me, and it'll always say, warning, consider your federal return. Well, I won't discuss this one. You can't file a return with AGI of 0, right? That's another thing I'll go over later. But it shows the notes that we've got in here. And if we've done this client for a couple of years, it's going to show their notes. And the only reason it's giving you this warning, if you will, is sometimes you might put a note in there that you want the reviewer to see, hey, go double check this or something, right? So that's why it gives you this. In this case, I'll just hit continue and we'll go on. Okay. It says something's not right. Your health insurance is missing some information. I skipped over this, but that's this tab right here. You've got to answer a question. I'll go ahead and go back here. It said, did you, your spouse, or dependent have insurance? And under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, or the marketplace. I'm going to say no for this one, right? I'll go back into my e-file screen because I just wanted to go through it to show you these things. Okay, continue here. Okay, so here's that pathway I was kind of telling you about. Now, Practice Lab doesn't have all the different pathways that I showed you about, but it's got return details right here. How do you want to refund? Do you want to e-file and mail a payment, e-file and have it direct debit, e-file and do a paper return? I'll say e-file mail payment. There's no refund. That's why it's saying that there's payment. If there was a refund, it would say e-file receive refund by direct debit or receive check, right? So I'll hit continue. This takes me to the next step on the pathway, which are these custom questions. Check with your site coordinator. I'm not sure we're supposed to be answering this year, okay? But if we are, they're going to tell you to answer it. They're not required. So in this case, I'm going to just go down here and hit continue. It'll take me to these custom credits. As I said, I've never seen this screen, so I'll hit continue. Here's the important page, the submission page, okay? Now, it warns me up here that electronic filing is not available until January. Okay, we know that. But I still want to go down here. Here's where I could print. See here where we have different types of returns we could print? I'll just say taxpayer copy, and here I could print it. I'm not going to do that because I've already shown you how we could print it, right? Here's some tags that you could put to it. When I'm done, I want to make sure I say mark return ready for review. Well, it's not ready for review yet, so I won't mark it. But this is what we just went through and talked about. So it says I must save the summary checkpoint. So I'm not going to worry about this now. I'm going to save and exit the return. Good. So I'm going to stop sharing right there. We know what we're going to do in session 2A, right? We're going to start talking about the intake and quality review and filing status. Maybe we'll get to dependents there and then save the income for the second session of session 2. We'll see how that goes. But until then, I look forward to seeing it during our next session, okay? Bye-bye.